Welcome back. In this video, we are going to touch on the talent pool page for recruiters, as well as the new applicants, applicant profile, and candidate profile page. These pages are all for recruiters. Okay, so I'm just going to load up this talent pool page inside of Wized and start off inside of Webflow. So inside of Webflow, again, you will see a skeletal structure because we design it inside of Webflow, bind it inside of Wized. Okay. Another thing on this page, we do use the Finsweet filter, and you can learn more about that at finsweet.com/attributes. And you'll be able to find the version 2 filter that works with Wized's dynamic data. Okay, so for this page, we have a candidate card. And we've added Wized attributes to this card because we want to load all of the candidates inside of Airtable. So every user here that is a candidate is where we'll load them in this talent pool. So this is essentially a directory for recruiters to see all of the candidates available. Okay, so this candidate card has the attribute of talent pool card. And then again, you just define all of the elements for this card. So talent picture, and then the name, as well as the little headline. And then we have skills, so talent skills name. And then this is the country, and then the button, which does not go to any specific page because we need it to go to candidate profile, which is essentially the CMS template page, since we aren't using the Webflow CMS. And then at the very bottom, we have an empty state over here, and that's for the filter. So for the Finsweet filter over here. Okay, back inside of Wized, you will be able to see that we have rendered a few candidates on this page. So just starting at the very top, what we're going to do first is create a request. So this request is going to be for, if I'm not mistaken, this request is going to be under Airtable over here. What we want to do is to load all the talent inside of Airtable. So this request is going to basically get a list of candidates, and we're not going to apply a filter because we want all of the candidates available inside of Airtable. And then for this request, we're going to set a trigger over here, which is going to essentially say when this page starts loading, please load all of the talent available. And now we can start by binding our data. So at the very top, we start with the talent pool card. We're going to render this card if the load all talent request has returned a status of 200, meaning that it has successfully loaded. And then what we're going to do is use another variable. In this case, I've defined it as v.j because v.i is a variable we used for all of the job posts. So just to keep this separate, we are going to use the variable v.j. And now we have another function in here, which essentially loads all of the talent available. And we are going to load all of these talent or all of these candidates in random order. So we do not want them to be in the same order every time a user visits this page. If you want them to be in the same order, you can simply just restructure this function to just call all of the candidates instead of setting it as random. And then now we can start binding our data on this page. So for all images, again, it's set as source. And now we use the request of load all talent, the variable of v.j because we want every individual image to be dynamic. And then the field will be profile image. Same goes for the name, we set that as text, and then the headline. And then the country, we'll get back to the skills because the skills is a separate array. So we need to define that separately. So then we set the text for country over here, and then the button over here. Okay, so let's first start off with the skills. So in Airtable, our skills for a particular candidate look like this. So if you just scroll down, you'll be able to see that the skills are multi-select options. So when they appear inside of Wized, they will be in the form of an array. And you can't simply just place them inside of Wized because Wized will struggle with essentially rendering all of the skills because they are set like this inside of Airtable. So what we're going to do is to define another variable, and this one will be v.skills, so that we can make sure every skill is going to be dynamic when we do render them. And we're going to use the same request, so load all talent, v.j first, and then get the skills. Okay, so these are the skills that are returned, right? As you can see, this is an array. And now, when we set the skills name, what we're going to do is load all talent and use the first variable that we defined for loading all of the talent. But now at the end of this request, we're going to add v.skills because we want to iterate through that array and get individual skills returned. If I were to remove this part at the very end, what we'll see is just a list of skills, and that is not what we want to do. What we want to do is to make sure it returns with an individual skill name. And that is how you render the skills over there. So for the talent button, so for recruiters, what we want to do is to send them to a candidate profile page where they can essentially view the particular information tied to a candidate. Inside of Webflow, this is how the candidate web profile page is set up to be. Okay, at the very top, we have the candidate profile image, and then we have their name, location, again, their bio. Then we have the skills as well over here. Then we have email, Talk.js, member chat, and then inside of this iframe, we now pull in a candidate's profile link. This is where not renaming the Wized requests comes in handy, because what this script is doing is essentially loading the individual talent request over here. So we're going to define this request in the next few minutes. So this script is essentially executing this request and then looking for that individual user's profile link and then injecting it into this iframe. Okay, so renaming anything inside of Wized when it comes to the requests, renaming anything inside of Airtable when it comes to the field names, that will cause issues with the template. So try to keep the information that is currently placed in the template a little bit similar, or if you want to rename something and need to know if it's binded to anything, please reach out to us in the Slack channel. Okay, the last button we have over here is just the candidate profile portfolio link, and that will just take them to the external link of their portfolio. Back to Wized. So when a recruiter wants to click on this button, we define a few parameters first. We first add a parameter called chat, and that's, you can define it as anything, but this is what is currently defined as in the template. And what we're going to do is just set the chat parameter as ID. So that will give us this individual user's Airtable ID. And you can verify that inside of Airtable as well. So this user's ID over here. Okay. And now we're going to set the URL as candidate profile and then the parameter to be ID candidate. So when I click on an individual candidate like this over here, that'll take me to the candidate profile page, and I will be able to see the information tied to a particular and individual candidate. That's because, again, it is using this particular ID in order to get the individual that is linked to that ID. Just to explain. Okay. So for this page, what we're first going to do is to create a request to show the individual talent's information. heading over back to the request, what we're going to now define it as is load the individual user. And for this request, we are going to get a particular candidate from Airtable that is equal to the record. So this record that we defined here, we're going to basically return that candidate so that we can load all of their information on here and no other candidate's information. Okay, so you've created the load individual talent request. Now you're going to trigger that request. Under recruiters, load individual talent. That request will be triggered on page load. And now you can start binding your information. So for the candidate profile image, you will now bind it to load individual talent because this is for an individual candidate. So an individual candidate, talent, applicant. These are used interchangeably inside of the template. And okay, so that's the profile image. And then we have the name that is set to load individual talent data name. So you can see that is the user's name, their bio, and then their email. Email will be set to a particular URL. So essentially a URL so that it can open up the email chat, the email mailbox for that particular user. So instead of setting that as text, we're going to set that as a link over here and then bind it to the user's email. Okay, the portfolio, the candidate portfolio, not that one, this one, the candidate profile portfolio link is also set to a link whereby we bind the portfolio link that a candidate has inside of Airtable. And then this iframe over here, again, we just defined it over here, whereby it will load that individual talent's portfolio link in the form of an iframe. And on the live website, this is how it looks like. So it's just a cool way of showing a portfolio of a particular candidate. Just close that, back inside of Wized. Okay, and now we have the skills over here again, and we just redefine the skills using the new request over here. So load individual talent skills, just to go through that array. So we return with all of that individual user's skills, and then we set the name as load individual talent skills over here. Okay, so now a few things on this page. We have Talk.js and MemberChat that we are now going to touch on the candidate profile page. So for a recruiter to chat with or for a recruiter to send a message to a candidate, yes, we have two buttons over here. The first one is for Talk.js. That's to initiate Talk.js. What we're going to do is when a recruiter clicks on this page, they will be redirected to the message Talk.js recruiters page over here. Okay, this is the messages page that they'll be redirected to. But when they're redirected, what we want to do is to make sure that on that page, they are going to have the particular candidate's ID, so the particular candidate's Airtable ID that will be passed through to the next page. And then we're just going to redirect them to that page using this HTML attribute at the bottom. For MemberChat, it's the same, but we are now going to set the member ID instead. So that particular individual talent's Memberstack ID, which is set to this, and then we're going to redirect them to the MemberChat page. So this page over here to open a chat box with that member. Okay, when we move on to the next pages, so for messages for Talk.js for candidates and for MemberChat, I will dive in deeper on how those two pages work. But for now, we are going to go back to the talent pool pages over here. And I believe the next page that we're going to touch on is the new applicants page. So when a recruiter has received a new application, All of those will go in the new applicants page over here. If a recruiter has a new applicant, they'll be able to see them all listed over here. And just to go back to that page inside of Webflow. Okay, the page is set up similar to how the candidates active jobs has been sort of set up, whereby they have an empty wrapper with the attribute of Wized no applicants. And then we also have another applicant item over here, which will just give us the applicant details. Okay. Inside of Wized, now we are going to define these elements. What we want to do on this page is to, first of all, create a request to load all of the recruiters' applicants. So that request is going to be load recruiters' applicants. And it's essentially going to tell Airtable to go to the job applications table and then return all of the job applications where the recruiter ID. So this recruiter ID inside of Airtable, just open up one of these applications all the way at the bottom. So this recruiter ID is equal to the logged in members Airtable ID. If those two things are true, then it's going to load all of the recruiters ID, all of the recruiters applicants. And then we can start loading or rendering the list of applicants available. Firstly, we can use the variable of v.i to loop through all of the applicants. And then now the request we're going to use is load recruiter applicants. And that just gives us all of the applicants linked to that recruiter. And then what we are going to do now is, so the applicant name is going to be load, using the request for loading the recruiter's applicants. Load recruiter applicants, use the variable because we want all of the information to be dynamic, and that's going to be set to name. So email is going to be the same over here. And you can see that we set up the email as well to be a link. And then we have the applicant job that has been applied to. So if you go back to the load recruiter applicants request, there, over here, you can scroll down or go through the payload to see where exactly is the field that you're trying to reference. In this case, it's the job name, so UI designer. All right, if a recruiter clicks on one of these jobs, on one of these applicants, they'll then be redirected to this page. They'll be redirected to the applicant profile page, and that inside of Wized is set here, where we now add a new parameter called applicant, and that is in order to take the applicant's Airtable ID to the next page, and then the link will be taking the recruiter to the applicant profile page when that is clicked. So just to click on this, you'll now see that I've been redirected to this applicant's page or applicant's profile, and I'll be able to see a few screening questions over here. And these questions come from the application form that a candidate has submitted in the last couple of videos. Okay, on this page, we'll also be able now to set the tags, so whether a candidate is hired, screening, or rejected. And this is a good way for candidates to know where they are in the process of being hired, essentially. We'll touch on this page in the next video. Bye.